Ha ha, very funny, Eric muttered as his mother playfully held the dress against him. Oh, but darling, you look simply lovely in this, she teased, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. The dress, a delicate cotton creation sprinkled with soft floral pattern, had emerged from the pile of jumble she was sorting through. It looked almost untouched, as did many of the other garments, no surprise, considering the wealth of their neighborhood. Likely, its previous owner had worn it once or twice before growing bored and moving on to something newer, shinier. His mother sighed wistfully as she regarded him. Oh, how she adored her only child, but there was a small, unspoken longing a daughter would have been a delight, someone to Emily dress up, to share in those intimate mother-daughter rituals. But fate had given her Eric, and she cherished him just the same. Shaking off her thoughts, she returned to sorting, and the matter was forgotten. The clothes were bundled up and stored in the garage, waiting for collection the following week. Eric was all boy, no doubt about that. He had an eye for girls, a keen one at that, but he couldn't deny a certain fascination with their attire, the lightness, the delicate fabrics, the effortless elegance. He knew the feel of lycra against his legs from his sports gear, the snug stretch of his running tights. But the idea of actually dressing up, that had never crossed his mind. At least, not until recently. One of his mother's magazines had caught his eye, a spread on transvestites, complete with before and after photos. The transformation was striking, almost magical. The idea of shifting one's appearance so completely intrigued him. How could fabric, makeup, and a few careful adjustments create such an illusion? Later that week, an early release from school had him home before anyone else. He was in his room when he heard his mother come in with a friend, their voices drifting up through the floorboards. Oh, you're so lucky, having one of each. And now Diane's getting married, it's every mother's dream. I'd love to go shopping for a daughter's wedding things, his mother sighed. Well, maybe you'll get your chance if Eric pops the question to Nancy, the neighbor teased. They're nearly done with college, who knows. Eric froze. That was news to him. Sure, he liked Nancy a lot, actually, but marriage. He hadn't thought that far ahead. And the idea of getting married just to fulfill his mother's dream, not a chance. That weekend, they'd brought the donation bags back into the house, preparing them for collection. Once again, the dress resurfaced, and once again his mother held it up with an impish grin. Oh yes, it's definitely you, she declared. Eric flushed but laughed, shaking his head as he stepped away. Then, on a whim, he turned back, took the dress in his hands, and held it against himself. With a playful twirl, he grinned. Mum, you might be right, he quipped before handing it back. They both laughed, the moment passing like a ripple in a pond, but something had stirred within him, something he couldn't quite name. Later, when Eric returned from football, he noticed the jumble bags were still there. He smirked and quipped, "Has my dress not gone yet?" His mother chuckled, shaking her head. Nope, I'm afraid the van broke down. Looks like we're stuck with them for another week. He wandered into the kitchen, fixing himself a drink, but his mind was already made up. A decision had taken root, one that sent a thrill through him. Returning to the living room, he dropped onto the sofa beside his mother, a sleazy smile playing on his lips. She eyed him suspiciously. All right, what are you up to? He hesitated for a moment, then took a breath. I don't want you to think I'm weird or anything, but will you hear me out? His mother nodded, curiosity flickering in her gaze. We've been joking about that dress, right? He began. Well, what if I actually tried it on? Not just messing around properly. Hair, makeup, shoes, the whole thing. Just for fun. I could be your daughter for a day. I know Dad's away next weekend, so how about it? His mother stared at him, momentarily stunned into silence. A whirlwind of emotions tumbled through her: surprise, intrigue, even a quiet sort of delight. But most of all, she searched his face. He was serious, and he was still smiling. The idea didn't unsettle her as much as she expected. In fact, it stirred something warm within her. A chance to indulge just a little in the daughter she had never had. Eric, I have to say, I wasn't expecting this, she admitted. You're sure this is something you want to do? You know, you can tell me if there's Anything else on your mind? He laughed. No worries, Mum. It's just a bit of fun between us, that's all. She studied him a moment longer before nodding. It could be fun, but let me think about it. Sure thing, no pressure. Just let me know, he said, standing up and heading upstairs. He was pleased with himself not just for the boldness of the suggestion, but for the way it had completely caught her off guard. Alone in the living room, his mother sat in quiet contemplation. She had never, in all her years, imagined a conversation like this. Had he felt pressured by their teasing? Had she pushed him in some way? But no, he had looked excited, even eager. If this was truly just a game, where was the harm? Besides, the idea intrigued her. The makings of an outfit were all there in the jumble sacks. A little shopping trip for hosiery and underwear wouldn't break the bank. Yes, this could be an amusing little experiment. She called up the stairs. Eric, I thought it through. If you're happy, we'll do it. But if you change your mind at any point, just say so. I think you know I would have loved a daughter as well as you, so I'll enjoy the illusion. We'll put together an outfit, and since your father is away, next Saturday it is. He grinned, bounding back downstairs. Really? That's brilliant. We'll have a right laugh. I can't wait to see how I look and how it feels. She smiled indulgently. All right then, no other plans for Saturday, you hear? I'll take care of everything. Then, a thought crossed her mind. We'll need a name for my new daughter. Your father and I had one picked out, you know. If you'd been a girl, we were going to call you Emily. Eric considered it for a moment, then nodded. Emily, yeah, I like that. Sounds all right to me. Now, make sure you have a bath, then straight to bed, young lady. His mother instructed with a playful grin. Eric chuckled, shaking his head at her sudden shift in tone, but decided to play along. Yes, Mum, he replied, smirking as he made his way upstairs. He followed orders, soaking in the warm bath, his mind buzzing with the strange excitement of what was to come. This was all a bit of fun, wasn't it? Just a harmless game. And yet, there was something thrilling about the anticipation. As he stepped into his room, towel wrapped around his waist, his amusement turned to surprise. Laid out neatly on his bed was a nightgown soft, delicate, and undeniably feminine. Next to it, a small note in his mother's handwriting. Just to get you in the mood. He stared at it for a moment, a slow smile creeping onto his face. Well, she was certainly committing to the game. With a chuckle, he picked up the nightgown, feeling the unfamiliar fabric between his fingers. This is going to be interesting, he murmured to himself before slipping it on. Eric stirred from sleep, the silky embrace of the negligee still clinging to his skin. For a moment, he simply lay there, savoring the unfamiliar yet oddly pleasant sensation. This feels nice. Maybe I'll just keep it, he mused drowsily before reality came rushing back. Today was the day. Up you get, sleepyhead, his mother called, her voice laced with excitement. He sat up groggily as she bustled into the room. Come on, we've got to get moving. Have a shave, put on some underwear, and throw on your tracksuit and trainers. Nothing else. Then straight downstairs for breakfast. That jolted him awake. What's going on, Mum? Why the rush? She simply smiled and wagged a finger. Just do as you're told, young lady. I'll be waiting for you. Young lady. The words hit differently this time. It wasn't just playful teasing anymore today, it was real. He did as instructed, freshening up quickly before slipping into his tracksuit. When he reached the breakfast table, his mother was already waiting, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Now, please don't be cross, she began, her tone measured, but I didn't feel I could do justice to your hair or makeup myself, so I asked Kathy to help out. She's a professional, after all more up-to-date with younger styles, and she's agreed to give you a full makeover before her regulars arrive. She's very discreet, so you've got nothing to worry about. Is that all right? Eric blinked. He hadn't expected this. It was one thing to dress up at home for a laugh, but a full-blown makeover by a professional? The thought sent a nervous flutter through him. But then again, wasn't the whole point to do this properly? And it was just a one-time thing. Yeah, I think so, he replied, trying to sound casual. But how do I get there without anyone seeing me? His mother smiled reassuringly. "That's easy, I'll drive you. Your hair is long anyway, and in your tracksuit, no one will think anything of it." And just like that, they were off. The salon wasn't far, and by the time they pulled up outside, Eric could feel his nerves creeping in. It looked closed, but as soon as they approached, the door swung open, and Kathy greeted them warmly. She took one look at his apprehensive face and led him aside. "Now, don't worry," she said, her voice gentle. "Your mother's told me everything, and I think what you're doing is wonderful, not just fun, but a sweet gesture. Just relax and enjoy it, all right? I promise we're not making any permanent changes." She turned to his mother. "We'll need about an hour. You go on home, I'll call when she's ready." His mother squeezed his hand, gave him an encouraging smile, and disappeared out the door, leaving him alone with Kathy. The beautician clapped her hands together. "All right then, it'll be easier if I call you Emily from now on, don't you think?" She gave him a knowing smile. "Just do as I say, and before you know it, you'll be home looking absolutely lovely." She led him to the back of the salon and gestured to a small cubicle. "Now, let's see what we're working with. Slip out of your tracksuit and put on the robe hanging inside." Eric swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. There was no turning back now. When he stepped out of the cubicle, Kathy greeted him with a knowing smile. "Right then, slip off the robe and lie down on this table." Eric hesitated for only a moment before obeying. He was committed now. She wasted no time, squeezing cool cream onto her hands before smoothing it across his legs, arms, and chest in slow, practiced strokes. "This will remove your body hair. I know there's not much, but we're going to do this properly." The cream tingled slightly as it settled into his skin. After a few minutes, Kathy helped him to his feet and guided him toward the shower room. "Now just rinse it off and I'll be back in a moment." He followed her instructions, stepping under the warm spray. As the cream washed away, so did the last traces of his body hair. He hadn't considered himself particularly hairy before, but now his skin was utterly smooth, soft to the touch. Kathy was waiting as he emerged, a towel in hand. She dried him off methodically before directing him back onto the table, this time rubbing a soothing gel over his newly bare skin. It wasn't until he felt her hand grasp him between his legs that he stiffened in surprise. "Now then," Kathy said breezily, "nice girls don't want one of these dangling between their legs, do they?" His breath hitched. What was happening? He swallowed and gave a hesitant nod. "These," she continued, holding up a pair of rubberized, flesh-toned briefs, "are used by drag artists. They'll take care of things." He examined them as she slid them up his legs. The design was clever. His member was tucked neatly into a special compartment, pressing it snugly out of sight. Even more astonishing, the front featured a strip of realistic pubic hair. At first glance, it was as if nothing had ever been there. "Now, pop these on over them," Kathy instructed, handing him a pair of delicate, lacy panties. "This will keep everything in place, and just a little heads up, you'll have to sit to use the bathroom from now on." Eric hesitated for only a second before stepping into them. He glanced down. The transformation was unsettlingly effective. This makeover was going further than he had expected, but as Kathy had said earlier, just lie back and enjoy it. She handed him back the robe and guided him to the sink, where she began washing his hair. Her fingers massaged his scalp, working up a thick lather, before rinsing it clean. Then, to his surprise, she reached for a set of rollers and began curling his damp hair. "This takes a while, but it'll be worth it," she assured him as she worked. He sat there, feeling oddly tranquil, as she fastened roller after roller into place. When she was done, she led him back to the table. "Lie down again, dear. I'll put some gel on your chest. While the roller's set, it looks a little sore." The cooling sensation was instant and soothing, but that wasn't all. He felt another subtle weight press against his chest. "These pads will help the gel absorb," Kathy explained, but he had a sneaking suspicion that wasn't their only purpose. He could feel them soft, gentle pressure against his skin. They feel like... He didn't have time to think much about it before Kathy placed cooling eye pads over his eyes and began working on his hands. The light touch of a file smoothed the edges of his nails, followed by the cool sensation of polish being brushed on. The scent of nail varnish filled the air. Oh, this is a thorough job, he thought. It's going to take some effort to remove this. Kathy hummed to herself as she worked, occasionally adjusting the pads on his chest. He couldn't see a thing, but he could feel everything: the tight press of the rubber breeze, the glossiness on his fingertips, the subtle tug of the rollers in his hair. Let the polish dry, she instructed, and no peeking until I'm done with the makeup. She sat him up, carefully unfastened his robe, and began wrapping something around his chest. It tightened as she fastened it at the back. There, that'll help, she said approvingly before guiding him to the makeup chair. She removed the eye pads and face pack, revealing his refreshed, glowing complexion. You've got such soft skin, she noted. I won't overdo it, don't worry. He felt the brush of foundation against his cheeks, the tickle of mascara on his lashes, the cool swipe of lipstick on his lips. His pulse quickened. What do I even look like right now? But Kathy wasn't done yet. She returned to his hair, removing the rollers one by one, then began styling the freshly curled locks with skilled hands. When she finally stepped back, a cascade of soft curls tumbled down to his shoulders. Kathy placed her hands on his shoulders and turned him gently toward the mirror. Well, Emily, she said with a smile, are you ready to see her? Okay, Emily, unveiling time. Close your eyes and I'll stand you in front of the mirror. Eric obeyed, squeezing his eyes shut as Kathy positioned him. He could feel the gentle weight of mascara on his lashes, the cool sensation of lipstick still lingering on his lips, and a tension in his chest that wasn't just nerves. What had she done to him? Now, open. His breath caught as his reflection was revealed. For a moment, he didn't recognize the person staring back at him. A girl stood there, blinking, wide-eyed, with soft curls framing a delicate face. Where did she come from? And then she moved. He tilted his head, so did she. Lifted a hand, so did she. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. That girl was him. She wasn't a stunning beauty, but she was undeniably pretty. He would have given her a second glance on the street. He turned to Kathy, mouth slightly open in disbelief. She grinned knowingly. It's you, dear. Don't you recognize Emily? He felt himself sway slightly, and Kathy steadied him. Now, undo your robe, she said gently. Eric hesitated but obeyed, letting the fabric slip from his shoulders. His stomach flipped. The panties revealed no trace of masculinity, but even more startling was the matching bra, because it wasn't just an empty piece of lingerie. No, it contained a very real-looking bust, full and rounded, rising and falling with each breath. I don't know what to say, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think this was possible. I look just like a girl. I don't even recognize my own body. He turned slightly, staring at his profile in awe. How can I thank you? Kathy smiled. Just make your mother happy today. That'll be thanks enough. She stepped away to call his mother, leaving him alone with his reflection. He touched his face, his chest, ran his hands down the silky lingerie that clung to his new form. The sensation of the stockings hugging his legs, the snug fit of the suspender belt, it was all so real. Kathy returned moments later, holding something delicate in her hand. One last thing before you leave. These complete the ensemble. She wrapped the lacy beige suspender belt around his waist and helped him clip it into place. Stockings are the final feminine touch for a very pretty girl. Now, ease them gently up your legs, yes, just like that. Perfect. Eric followed her instructions, feeling the smooth fabric stretch over his skin, the suspenders snapping lightly into place. His breath hitched. Kathy smiled approvingly. I'm expecting my regulars soon, so time to get dressed. Slip back into your tracksuit, and I'll tell your mother how to remove everything later. But for now, have a wonderful day, Emily. She pressed a kiss to his cheek and handed him a small bag filled with the cosmetics she had used. As soon as his mother's car pulled up outside, he hurried out, waving briefly before slipping into the passenger seat. His mother gasped as she took him in. The transformation was astonishing. It was still Eric, but it wasn't difficult to see her as Emily now. She smiled warmly. Hold your head up, Emily. No one will think you anything but what you appear to be. You're beautiful. I can't wait to get you home and into that dress. He laughed, sitting up a little straighter, though he still felt hyper-aware of every sensation: the softness of his outfit beneath the tracksuit, the weight on his chest, the tug of stockings against his thighs. It was disorienting. It was exhilarating. They arrived home within minutes. Fortunately, the drive allowed them to slip inside unnoticed, though waiting for his mother to unlock the door felt like an eternity. "Right, my lovely daughter, upstairs with you. Let's get you dressed. I've laid everything out on my bed." He hesitated before turning to her with a mischievous grin. "Close your eyes first, Mum. You're in for a surprise." Kathy was very thorough. Once she complied, he quickly stripped out of his tracksuit, taking a deep breath before perching on the edge of the bed. "All right, you can look now." His mother opened her eyes and gasped. "Oh, my dear, what has she done to you? It looks so real. Are you okay? Does it hurt?" Her eyes flickered to his chest, to the delicate curve of his waist, to the undeniable girl sitting before her. "She's given you a woman's body." He smiled. "Don't worry, Mum, it feels fine. It's just latex, it should peel off easily. Apart from getting used to the weight on my chest, I'm actually pretty comfortable." The lingerie was Kathy's gift. His mother clapped a hand to her mouth, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Oh, you look wonderful. I must get my camera. Wait here." Seconds later, the flash was going off, and she was eagerly directing him to pose this way and that. He felt a strange thrill as he followed her commands, arching a little here, tilting his head there. Then she hesitated. "Emily, one last request. You can say no if you want to." She hesitated, then continued softly. "Would you let me take one without the underwear? Just the body modifications. They're so realistic. Please?" Eric smirked. "In for a penny. Go on then. But I keep the negatives. You're enjoying this, Mum." She grinned unabashedly. "I am." As she snapped the final pictures, something shifted between them. This wasn't just a game anymore. Emily was real, and for today, she was hers. After a few more shots, she sighed, lowering the camera. "All right, my beautiful girl, time to get you dressed." Emily stood still, watching her eagerly. What would she choose for her daughter to wear? Emily lifted her arms as her mother slipped the delicate underslip over her head. The wispy fabric cascaded over her body like a cool whisper, caressing her smooth skin in a way that made her shiver. Then came the dress, the one that had started this whole adventure. She stepped into it, feeling the light material swirl around her legs before her mother zipped it up. It was just a fraction too big, but once the cuffs were buttoned, it fit well enough. More than that, it felt right. The dress was impossibly light, offering freedom of movement unlike anything she'd worn before. It was a sensation she could only describe as wonderful. Next came the shoes, a pair of white sandals, slightly worn from the jumble. They pinched a little, a tad too small, but the heel was low enough that after a few careful steps, she adjusted to them. Her mother stood back, appraising her with a satisfied smile. "I told you that dress suited you. Now, for the finishing touches." She fastened a necklace around Emily's neck, then clipped on a pair of earrings. "Oh, and of course," she said with a knowing grin, "some perfume. Chanel no. 5 only, the best for my girl." The scent enveloped her, rich and luxurious. As Emily gazed at herself in the full-length mirror, taking in the polished nails, the soft makeup, the way the dress floated around her, she felt lightheaded. A wave of emotions surged through her: excitement, disbelief, a strange kind of happiness she couldn't quite name. She swayed slightly, and her mother caught her, steadying her with a gentle kiss on the forehead. "Easy, darling," she whispered, her eyes shining with warmth. Emily smiled, feeling safe in her embrace. A few more photos, then her mother took her hand and led her toward the landing. "Now, let's plan the rest of our day over coffee. Take care on the stairs, young lady." Walking down the stairs in heels, even low ones, was an entirely new experience. She had to move carefully, aware of every step. By the time she reached the kitchen, She was acutely conscious of the way the dress brushed against her legs, the faint shimmer of polish on her nails as she reached for her cup, the lingering scent of Chanel No. 5 in the air. Her mother beamed at her. "First, we need to brush up your girl skills. You've had so little time to learn basic walking and sitting properly. Then we must get you some new things, especially shoes. Those simply won't do. And of course, a new dress and some accessories." Emily blinked. "Wait, what?" Her mother's final words stifled the protest forming on her lips. She hadn't fully considered what today meant. Of course, her mother would want to take her daughter out. That was the whole point of the fantasy. Emily swallowed. "You mean, into town?" "Yes, dear, into Manchester. That's where the best shops are," her mother said breezily. "No one knows you there, and even if they did, they'd never recognize you. Don't worry, everything will be fine. I'm in charge and I'll look after you. And remember, this is for fun. I won't make you do anything against your will." Emily took a deep breath. This was happening. "Okay, I'm all right. Let's get to it." They finished their coffee. She was amused to see a faint smear of lipstick on the rim of her cup and noticed the additional taste of it when she licked her lips. Then came the lessons: walking, sitting, standing, even how to hold her hands. She never realized just how many subtle movements made up the art of femininity. The shoes were a challenge, but she adjusted, learning how to carry herself with grace. By 10:30, her mother deemed her ready. "Now, let me show you how to touch up your lipstick," she instructed, demonstrating before handing her a small shoulder bag. It contained the cosmetics Kathy had given her, a few other feminine essentials for effect, and a small wallet with £30 and some change. Emily stared at the bag. This was real. She was about to step beyond the safety of the house. Her mother took her hands. "Just act naturally, treat people as they treat you. No one will know. If anyone asks around here, you're my niece Emily. But in town, you'll be my daughter. Okay?" Emily exhaled. "Okay, but I'm really nervous, Mum." "That's understandable, my love. A girl's first day out is always an occasion." Her mother squeezed her hands, her excitement barely contained. "Now let's get out there and shop till we drop." Emily forced a smile, trying to steady herself. This was it. Her first day out as Emily. Emily stepped out of the house cautiously, scanning the street for any curious onlookers. The cool breeze ghosted over her stockinged legs, sending a shiver through her, not just from the temperature, but from the vulnerability she felt. It was one thing to dress up in the safety of home, but out here, under the open sky, it was different. Exposed. Her mother took her time locking the door and unlocking the car with a click. Each passing second felt stretched, every noise exaggerated in Emily's heightened state of awareness. But no one seemed to pay her any mind. Once inside the car, they pulled out of the driveway and onto the quiet street in Altrincham, heading toward Manchester city centre. The 20-minute journey felt like an eternity. Every time they stopped at traffic lights, she was convinced people were staring. Did that woman just glance at her? Was that man frowning? Did someone know? "Hold your head high, Emily," her mother scolded, her tone firm but kind. She took a breath, straightened her posture, and tried to settle into the role. Slowly, her nerves began to ease. When a van driver gave her a particularly interested look, she hesitated, then, to her own surprise, flashed a smile. The driver grinned back, clearly appreciating the view. That moment changed everything. They parked in the multi-story car park behind Kendall's. As they stepped out, her mother reminded her to take her shoulder bag before leading her toward the lift. No one was around as they entered the empty car, and Emily felt momentary relief until, just as her mother pressed the button, a young couple rushed in at the last second. Suddenly, she found herself pressed close to a young man, about her own age, in the confined space. She could feel his eyes roaming over her, the weight of his gaze assessing, appreciating. Her pulse quickened. He was checking her out. His girlfriend, noticing, shot him a sharp look. He quickly averted his eyes. When the lift doors opened, he stepped back, gesturing with a polite smile. "After you, ladies." As they walked away, Her mother leaned in with a whisper, amusement in her voice. Well, he's certainly got a close enough look. Satisfied now? No one will ever know. Emily exhaled, her heart still racing, but she had to admit her mother was right. Making their way through the back streets towards Street Anne Square, she became more aware of the kind of attention she was drawing. The women around her hardly spared her a glance. Couples walked by, lost in their own world, but men on their own. Their gazes lingered. They see a girl. Her mother slowed as they passed a row of boutique windows, admiring the latest fashions. She chatted casually about the displays, drawing Emily into the conversation. At first, Emily played along, thinking it was just a way to pass time, but before long, they were stepping inside one of these previously forbidden places, a dress shop. A silky, cream-colored spring dress caught her mother's eye. The shop assistant, ever vigilant, wasted no time approaching. "That's a lovely choice," she said smoothly. "Would you like to try it on?" Emily hesitated. "Don't worry, dear," her mother said encouragingly. "I'll come with you." She swallowed and nodded. Before she knew it, they were in a changing cubicle, slipping the dress over her head. It fit perfectly. The soft fabric hugged her figure in all the right places, but there was a problem. It didn't match her stockings, or her shoes. She shouldn't have cared. And yet, the mismatched look bothered her. The assistant noticed immediately. "Aha, I see the issue," she said with a knowing smile. "Allow me to find something that complements the outfit. Stockings or tights, young lady?" Emily froze. The words came out before she could stop them. "Stockings," she squeaked. The assistant returned with a pair of cream micromesh stockings and elegant cream sandals with a 3-inch heel. "I've guessed your size," she said. "Try them on. I think it'll make all the difference." Back in the cubicle, Emily removed the dress and carefully rolled down her old stockings. Her mother showed her how to ease the new ones up her legs, smoothing them gently before clipping them to the suspenders. They were exquisite, whisper-thin and elegant. Just as she was slipping on the sandals, the assistant's voice cut through the curtain. "Would you ladies like a coffee?" Emily nearly died. The woman had just peeked in. She must have seen everything. But she hadn't reacted, because to her, nothing was out of the ordinary. "That would be lovely," her mother replied smoothly. "We'll be out in a moment." They readjusted the dress, and when Emily finally stepped out, she turned to the full-length mirror. Her breath caught. The dress was stunning. The stockings and shoes completed the look perfectly. She barely recognized herself. Her mother and the assistant stood behind her, nodding in agreement. "Just sit here and have your drink," her mother said. "I'll be back in a moment." As she walked off, the assistant came over and snipped the tag from the dress. "Such a fine choice," she murmured approvingly. Emily sipped her coffee, the lipstick imprint on the cup catching her eye. She felt different. She felt real. Emily was still adjusting to the idea of wearing the dress all day when her mother reappeared, carrying a store bag and her shoulder bag, which, incidentally, matched the new dress perfectly. "I've told them you'll wear it now," she said with a satisfied smile. "All your old things are in the bag. Except for the stockings, I put those in your shoulder bag, since they were brand new." Emily blinked. "Mum, I thought this was supposed to be a bit of fun. This dress must have cost a fortune, and I'm only wearing it for today." "Just indulge your mother, dear, and let me worry about the cost," she replied airily. "I'm enjoying myself, and I think you are too. Now come on, I've got a stunning daughter for the day, and I want to make the most of it." Emily sighed but smiled inwardly. Well, this was my idea. Might as well roll with it. "It must be time for lunch soon," her mother mused. "Come on, I think I know just the place." They made their way through the square, past the church, and onto the pedestrianized section of King Street, where the city's most elegant designer boutiques lined the street. It was a whirlwind of window shopping, admiring price tags, and even trying on a few more outfits. Thankfully, from Emily's perspective, no further purchases were made. At one point, her mother turned to her, her eyes shining. "This morning has been wonderful for me, Emily. I always dreamed of taking a daughter shopping, and you've made that possible. Thank you so much." Emily felt a surprising warmth at the words. "That's fine, Mum." It was a bit of a culture shock at first, but I'm actually enjoying it. The clothes feel so much nicer than boys' things. And people seem to treat me differently. Better, even. I feel relaxed now. Her mother beamed. "That is marvelous, dear. I truly am grateful. Now, let's get that lunch." They made their way back toward Kendall's, stepping into the elegant ground-floor cafe. The place was self-service, but it was the spot to see and be seen. They collected a light meal and found a table by the window. Emily picked at her food before whispering, "Mum, that man over there keeps staring at me." Her mother glanced up subtly. "That's quite normal," she said with a small smile. "Just smile back and return to your food. He sees a beautiful young lady, you should be flattered." Emily blushed but tried to act natural. As they finished their meal and gathered their things, the man, impeccably dressed and exuding European charm, stood up and approached their table. "Excuse me, ladies," he said smoothly, his accent unmistakably French. "I do not mean to intrude, but I could not help noticing this very attractive young lady. Surely she is too old to be your daughter." Her mother gave a polite smile. "You are too kind, mister." "Ah, forgive me. I am Pierre Dumont. Charmed, I'm sure. I am Avery Higgins, and this is my daughter, Emily. How can we help you, Mr. Dumont?" "Ah, two lovely English ladies." He gestured to his table, where a young woman sat looking decidedly unhappy. "I'm a fashion designer, and I have an exhibition of my latest creations this evening. My favorite model," he nodded toward the sulking girl, "is sick and cannot continue. Would Mademoiselle Emily do me the honor of taking her place? It is a small, private showing, not a large crowd. You have the same light in your complexion as Florence, and you look to be the same size. I would, of course, pay the usual fee, and you may choose one of the dresses from the collection to keep." Emily and her mother sat in stunned silence. Pierre Dumont leaned forward earnestly. "I realize this must be something of a shock, but please, I implore you, help me out." Mrs. Higgins recovered first. "This is indeed a great honor for my daughter to be chosen in this way," she said smoothly. "But she has never done anything like this before, and she is quite shy." Emily, utterly speechless, turned to her mother, eyes wide with panic. "Just say no," she willed her. Dumont pressed on. "Do not worry. I saw you two walking in. She is a natural, and Florence will assist her. You would be most welcome backstage as well." Mrs. Higgins, now completely swept up in the moment, gave a delighted laugh. "Of course we must help. What an opportunity for a young girl." Emily's stomach flipped. Oh no. Evening arrived, and despite her initial apprehension, Emily had fully immersed herself in the experience. From the cafe, they had gone straight to the Grand Hotel where the exhibition was being held. There, she had her first lessons in walking a catwalk, an entirely foreign skill that, at first, had her stumbling in her heels. But with time and encouragement, even Florence, despite her illness and broken English, had helped her refine her steps. The seamstresses quickly took her measurements, making last-minute alterations to the outfits she would wear. Emily didn't get to see the designs beforehand, which only added to her nervous excitement. Yet, surrounded by professionals, models, and designers, the sheer energy of the environment slowly eased her nerves. The first few outfits were classic French haute couture, well-cut, elegant, and refined. Then came the more daring designs, with sheer fabrics and visible lingerie. Emily felt her pulse quicken, but the convincing illusion Kathy had created reassured her. "Thank God everything looks real," she thought, moving with newfound confidence. And then the final dress. A wedding gown. It was breathtaking, an exquisite creation of delicate French lace, its bodice and arms sheer and intricate. The gown required her to go breathless, the illusion of cleavage subtly visible beneath the whisper of fabric. As she stepped onto the runway, the soft rustle of the dress sent a shiver through her. She felt beautiful. Then something unexpected happened. As she reached the end of the runway, a male model appeared beside her. She hadn't been told about this. A hush fell over the audience as he approached, his movements confident, his presence commanding. In one graceful motion, he lifted her veil and with effortless charm, pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. A ripple of emotion surged through Emily. And to her own astonishment, it felt right. The applause, the admiration, the warmth, it all washed over her in waves. She had stepped into a fantasy, and for a fleeting moment, she didn't want to step out of it. When the show ended, Emily and her mother joined the designer and his entourage for a celebratory drink. Exhausted but exhilarated, Emily sat beside her mother as she collected the modeling fee and a dress of her choice from the collection. They were ready to leave when Dumont turned to them once more. Mademoiselle, please, I have one last favor to ask. Emily, still flushed from the evening, looked at him curiously. The wedding dress, he said, eyes alight with inspiration. It was made for you. It looks so right on you, don't you agree? Please, wear it one more time. Emily felt her heart flutter. We have booked a lovely little church near Macclesfield for a photo shoot tomorrow. If you return in the morning, we will dress you again and take you there by limousine. I will be most generous with the fee, and you may keep the dress. Emily barely had time to process the offer before she heard herself say it. Yes, she breathed, before her mother could even react. We'll be here. I'd love to help. Her mother beamed. Dumont clasped his hands in delight. The ride home was quiet, the streets nearly empty. This time, Emily wasn't concerned about being seen. She barely noticed the familiar turns along Chester Road. The feeling of the night lingered, the kiss, the applause, the weight of the gown. Back home, she entered what felt like an alien space, Eric's bedroom. The contrast was startling, but she pushed the thought aside as her mother handed her another nightdress, yet another silent purchase she hadn't noticed. Emily was too tired to question it. As her mother gently wiped the makeup from her face, her eyelids drooped. Sleep took her before she even realized her mother was making a few late-night phone calls. The next morning, still in their nightwear, mother and daughter shared a light breakfast. This time, they opted for minimal makeup and a simple skirt and blouse. After all, Dumont's team would handle the final transformation. There were more people out this morning, but Emily noticed something different. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't hiding. She held her head high. She met the eyes of those who looked her way, even smiling at one or two. And the men? They noticed her. Arriving at the hotel, they found the designer's team already waiting. The moment she stepped inside, it began again, the styling, the primping, the delicate touches of makeup. Soon she was standing before the mirror, once again adorned in that dress. Her mother, now also transformed, appeared beside her. She looked radiant. A stunning suit hugged her frame, elegant, graceful, the very picture of a mother of the bride. Her makeup was flawless, her hair beautifully styled. Emily stared at her in wonder. "Oh, my dear child," her mother whispered, eyes misty with emotion. "You look lovely." "And so do you, mother," Emily murmured, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Your mother will follow in the second car," an assistant informed her gently. "Now, we must go." Emily stepped outside, and to her shock, a small crowd had gathered. They believed it. They believed she was a bride. Strangers smiled warmly, some taking photographs. An elderly woman, her eyes soft with nostalgia, approached her. "You look so lovely, dear," she said kindly, patting her hand. "What a lucky man your husband-to-be is." Emily's breath caught. She smiled because what else could she do? Then, with a final glance back at the cameras, she lifted the hem of her gown, stepped into the waiting Rolls-Royce, and was carried away into the next chapter of the dream. The car wound its way through the southern suburbs of Manchester, the soft hum of the engine barely registering over Emily's racing thoughts. Every time they slowed at a junction, she could see people peering in, their eyes lighting up at the sight of the bride. She felt the admiration pressing in through the windows, a surreal mix of excitement and disbelief curling inside her. Then, without warning, the car veered off the main road and pulled into a quiet pub car park. "Just a moment," the driver called back. "We're meeting someone here." Emily barely had time to process this when the door opened. A man stepped out from the pub, impeccably dressed in a morning suit, a top hat tucked under one arm. At first, she assumed he was just another extra for the shoot, another piece of this elaborate illusion. Then he slid into the seat beside her. "Hello, my dear. I believe you're called Emily today." Emily's breath hitched. She knew that voice. She turned, heart pounding, and met her father's gaze. She was struck dumb. "Don't worry, son," he said, then chuckled. "Or shall I say lass?" Her stomach clenched. "Your mother told me everything," he continued, his voice softer now, filled with something unexpected. "I couldn't miss this. It's the proudest moment in a father's life, giving his daughter away." His voice caught slightly, and he cleared his throat before continuing. "I thought my chance had passed after your mother couldn't have any more children after you." He looked at her, his eyes warm, a hint of pride shining in them. "You don't mind, do you? I'm so proud of you for what you've done. Your mother's had such a wonderful weekend." Emily swallowed hard. "But Dad, you don't mind. I mean, I'm a boy, not a girl." Her father smiled, shaking his head. "Of course I don't mind. You've made your mother so happy. That's what matters." He let out a short laugh. "I will say it was a bit of a shock. I've done a fancy dress party in drag once or twice, but this," he gestured at her, "takes it to a whole new level. I wouldn't have known looking at you, and I'm your father." He studied her for a moment. "So tell me, how does it feel, being dressed like that?" Emily hesitated. Then, almost shyly, she admitted, "Well, don't think I'm strange or anything, but it feels good. I mean, boys don't normally get to wear fabrics this fine, this delicate. I like the feeling of, well, fooling people." Her father grinned. "That's fair enough. But don't worry," Emily added quickly. "I don't think I'd want to do this much more. Getting a lady ready takes forever." Her father roared with laughter. "Aye, that it does." The car slowed as they turned onto narrow country lanes, eventually pulling up to a quaint little chapel nestled among the trees. Guests in elegant attire stood gathered outside, chatting amongst themselves. The designer and his team were already there, cameras poised, waiting for the bride. Emily's mother stood at the churchyard gate, her eyes alight as soon as she saw them. "Oh, my dear, you look radiant," she gushed. Then, glancing at her husband, she added with a knowing smile, "You don't mind about your father, do you?" Emily shook her head with a soft smile. "No, of course not, Mum. I seem to be making a lot of people happy today." Before she could say more, the photographers swept in. "All right, let's go through the whole thing just like a real wedding. We have guests, a groom, even a vicar. Just enjoy it, as if it were the real thing." Emily took a breath. If only they knew. The cameras flashed. They took the traditional shots, proud mother and father beside their beautiful bride. Two little girls in matching bridesmaid dresses, their tiny hands clutching bouquets of soft pink roses. Then, the church doors opened. An organist struck up a soft, melodic tune as Emily stepped forward, her veil creating a hazy barrier between her and the faces beyond. The guests rose in unison. She could feel their eyes on her. The groom and best man waited at the altar, their backs turned as tradition dictated. As she stepped closer, she caught sight of the groom's slicked-back ponytail. Then they reached the altar. Emily lifted her chin and kept her gaze forward. The vicar leaned in slightly, his voice low. "I know this is all make-believe, so we're skipping the full service. Let's go straight to the rings the photographers shot." The groom turned to the best man, accepting the ring before gently sliding it onto Emily's finger. The cameras flashed. Then the vicar's voice rang out. "You may kiss the bride." Emily's heart stopped. She barely had time to process what was happening before the groom reached up and lifted the veil. Emily's breath hitched. She turned, heart pounding, and found herself staring straight into the familiar, mischievous eyes of Nancy, her girlfriend. Her lips curled into a smirk as she whispered, "You've made your mother a very happy woman." Then, with a teasing glint in her eye, she added, "Now, will you marry me?" Emily Eric felt the world tilt. Nancy stood before her, a knowing smirk on her lips, mischief twinkling in her eyes. The weight of the wedding dress, the feel of the veil now resting on her shoulders, the ring snug around her finger, it was all suddenly too real. "Now, will you marry me?" The words echoed in her ears, and for a long moment she could do nothing but stare. Then laughter bubbled up, soft at first, then full and free. Nancy grinned, and Emily shook her head in disbelief. "You knew," she whispered. Nancy arched an eyebrow. "Darling, I always know. Did you really think your mother could keep something like this from me?" Emily swallowed, glancing around. Her parents, the designer, the photographers, all of them watched with amused expectation. She turned back to Nancy. "And what if I say no?" Nancy shrugged playfully. "Then I suppose you'll break the heart of a beautiful bride, and after all this effort, that would be such a shame." More laughter. The absurdity of it all, the whirlwind of the weekend, the transformation, the stolen kiss on the catwalk, the way it had felt right, it all collided into a single, inescapable truth. Eric had started this as a joke, a bit of fun, a way to indulge his mother's fantasy. But now, standing here, in lace and satin, beneath the soft glow of the chapel lights, something inside him had changed. He had changed. With a slow, measured breath, Emily looked Nancy straight in the eye, and with a teasing smile, replied, "I suppose I could say yes, just for today." The gathered guests erupted into applause, laughing and cheering as Nancy took her hand, pulling her close in a dramatic dip, placing a playful kiss on her cheek. The photographers captured it all. His mother wiped away a tear, his father chuckled, and Dumont clapped his hands in delight. And in that moment, wrapped in a fantasy more real than anything he had ever imagined, Emily wasn't sure where the dream ended and reality began. But for now, she decided she didn't want to know. And so, with the echoes of laughter filling the tiny chapel, the bride and her groom walked arm in arm down the aisle, out into the world, where the story would begin again.